Well, I'm here with Rob Kall, the publisher of Op-Ed News, opednews.com. That is the website you hear me advertise as one of the most prolific liberal sites, progressive sites in the country. Well, the publisher himself is here with us today, and he's here for two reasons. One, to tell us about that website and the importance of that website, especially in these times. But he's also here to tell us about that great book that he had. I didn't get a chance to completely read it, but scanned it. It's called The Bottom Up Revolution. But before we get started with all of that, I want to say, Rob Kall, welcome aboard. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, first of all, tell me a little bit. Let America know exactly who's Rob Kall. Who is Rob Kall?
Well, I publish opednews.com. I host the Bottom Up radio show, which is on Pacifica and Progressive Radio Networks, and on iTunes, of course. And I've got a book. I've got the book, The Bottom Up Revolution. I put 10 years into writing it because it's got over 100 interviews with people with a take on bottom up, and it comes out officially on Wednesday.
Well, I listened to one of your interviews that you did on Bottom Up. So before we even, there was just something that turned me on from that interview that really hit to the core. In that interview, you said the mammals, the leftovers on this planet, after those massive dinosaurs died.
Yeah.
These mammals, these other animals didn't try to attack these dinosaurs head on. Change came in a very different way. Ultimately, change came bottom up. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, that's based on a quote that I have on my email signature from Buckminster Fuller, who says you don't try to fight a big system head on. You replace it, and then the old one dies.
You know what? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And that's what I think that we have to do. We have to make something better that just grows and emerges and replaces the current system, which is so pathological.
You know, what is interesting, Rob, is you have people, many of us on the progressive side, we're speaking the same language using different terms. I mean, I had Professor Dr. Richard Wolff on a few weeks ago, and he said economies come, economies thrive, and then economies die. I think in a lot of ways you are saying how does a bad economy, or how does an economy that has completed its usefulness get replaced? You don't replace it from the top, but you do it bottom up. Why don't you kind of speak to that in that context?
I absolutely. I think, I've had Wolf on my show a couple times, and a lot of economists on my show. I think that we have a predatory, extractive economic system right now that is favorable to a few hundred companies and a few thousand billionaires and ultra wealthy people, and we need to change that. And that is only going to happen from the bottom up. It's only going to happen by enough people coming together to make these changes happen. We're looking right now at my generation. I'm a boomer, and I'm so embarrassed to be a boomer anymore. You've got boomer men tend to vote for Trump, and the remainder of them look like they're going for Biden because they're afraid. They're afraid that is the only way to beat Trump. But going with Biden really doesn't do anything at all to beat the system. And we need to beat the system. And the way we do that is to come up with solutions that are better than the system offers.
I love the way you say that. And it's interesting because without me telling you about that, part of what our program was going to be about today, after this segment completes, is in fact fear. The fear that so many have that they need to go with a Biden, not because that is what they want, but because they feel that that's the only thing America would go for as far as beating Trump. You mentioned something else that is quite interesting, how how this system operates is really for a few billionaires, and how can we instruct Americans that it is not, there are more, to put it bluntly, there are more of us than there are of them. Why it is so difficult for us from the bottom up to do what needs to be done. And I think you explain a whole lot of that in your book. So why don't you tell me some of the concepts you have in the book? There's one particular area you looked at, you asked the audience to stand up. Who here is born before 1980? And very few stood up. And you spoke about the dichotomy between the minds, the difference in the way the minds work. How does that apply to these boomers thinking they have to go to a Biden, and the rest of the people, those that are born after 1980, or maybe a little bit before that, think that, no, there is a better way?
Well, when you talk about fair, it makes me think, I play racquetball, and I've been playing for a long time. So I teach newcomers to the game that a lot of racquetball is about footwork. You have to put yourself in the position to hit the ball the best you can, the smartest you can. And what people tend to do is they have what I call a panic attack. They try to hit the ball as soon as they can get to it, not waiting that extra half a second, a fraction of a second, and moving a little bit to a smarter, better position to hit it much more effectively. And I think that's what's happening with our politics, is we've got people who are so panicked that they're going for what they see as the first option. And that's Biden. And I believe that the mainstream media, MSNBC and CNN, the supposedly lefty mainstream media, they're selling him so hard right now. It's insane. It's disgusting, really. And then the pollsters, you think that that's honest, that Biden has these incredible leads over Bernie Sanders or
No.
Elizabeth Warren? No, it's because they're selecting to only poll likely voters. So how do you define a likely voter? A likely voter is somebody who voted in the last couple of elections. Well, who does that leave out? Bernie's main base. It leaves out the young people. It leaves out the independents who are going to register as Democrats so they can vote for Bernie. They sure aren't going to register as Democrats so they can vote for Joe Biden. That's for sure. So one more thing, in the book, in the bottom-up revolution, I talk about how the science has shifted from a top-down linear approach to understanding the world to a bottom-up nonlinear systems view or chaos theory model for science. It's because it's the only one that works for subatomic particles and for complex ecosystems. The old systems of science worked okay for simple ideas, but not for the more complex ones. And it doesn't get much more complex than our politics. And what's wonderful about nonlinear dynamic science, chaos theory, is that it predicts that change can happen in a flash. And the way it happens is with new emergent processes, new emergent properties and behaviors, because in the nonlinear science, things happen in cycles, not in a straight line. So what's really exciting and hopeful about that is it doesn't take 50% plus one to make a change like that to happen. It doesn't take millions and millions of people. It takes an emerging, exploding process to happen. And that can happen really fast. And that's what we saw with the Arab Spring. Now, it doesn't always work out great. I mean, the Arab Spring was a disaster for Egypt, but it shows the power of what can happen. And it could be happening here. And we can believe in that. And we're seeing it all over the place. The bottom-up revolution in business has produced trillions of dollars in new business. And in business, it's changed the way everything's done. And of course, it's changed the way politics has been done. I interviewed Joe Trippi, the first campaign manager to do an internet campaign. And he basically said that you can't think about doing these things the old-fashioned way anymore. You have to understand bottom up. The thing is, a lot of people use many of the different concepts that I consider to be bottom up without really getting the big picture of bottom up. There's the old story of the blind wise ones. They're put in a room and they're blind, and they each touch a part of something to figure out what it is. And one of them says it's a rope, another says it's a tree trunk, another says it's a carpet, and another says it's a spear, and they're all touching an elephant, but they can't see it. The bottom-up revolution is like that. We've seen these different parts of it: crowdfunding and wisdom of the crowds and grassroots. But the whole picture of bottom-up is really that humans evolved to be bottom-up. We evolved over about 7 million years, living most of that time in hunter-gatherer bands, to have literally hundreds of different genes that cause us to be bottom-up beings. These genes cause us to have empathy, to be sensitive to each other, to cooperate, to be interdependent. They literally have caused us to think about how we do things and how our actions affect other people. Now, Native Americans have this same concept, and they talk about making a decision based on how it affects the next 7 generations. And all of this is part of who we are. The thing is, civilization came along as long ago as 10,000 years ago, and as recently as 500 years ago from hundreds of millions, if not billions of people. And civilization repressed a lot of our bottom-upness, our consciousness of our connections to each other and to nature. And what's great is that the internet and smartphones have catalyzed a return to bottom up, which I think is wonderful. And I think that people born after 1980, as you mentioned, I think they have different brains. And I've talked to many neuroscientists about it, and they all agree. And that means that they see the world in a more bottom-up way. And I think everybody can liberate their bottom-up genes, their epigenetics. You have genes, but they don't necessarily get expressed. And what's happened is the internet has liberated people's experience and their manifestation of the bottom-up genes, these hundreds of genes. I've also looked a lot over the years at psychopaths. There are scores of genes that contribute to somebody being a psychopath, but there are hundreds of genes that contribute to somebody being a bottom-up person, meaning somebody who has empathy and compassion and who pays attention to the people around them and the world around them.
That's interesting. The first part I want to tackle what you talked about is when you said things can happen rather quickly. So incrementalism isn't something that's a must, is what I get out of that. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It's a way that people keep things the same, really.
Incrementalism, exactly.
Yeah.
I think I placed an article on your site a few months ago exactly about that. Incrementalism isn't the way to go.
And I want to thank you, by the way, because you've been putting great content on the site, and I really value it and appreciate it.
Well, I think your site is a wonderful site, and it has a reach. It has a very large reach, and I think it's necessary. It's one of the necessary sites for the progressive movement. So it's one of the sites that I tell you, I make sure every opportunity that I get, you are one of the sites on the top of the list that gets advertised here. Now, let me ask. There's something that you said that it is absolutely true. Sometimes it's a bit concerning to me because of certain events that have occurred with me. You mentioned about the advent of the cell phone, and I spoke about the advent of social media, etc. My biggest concern about that is because of something that happened to a couple of friends, including myself, in this business. We can talk about what happened to, let's say, one of the largest Facebook bloggers, if you would, not Facebook, YouTube bloggers, Tim Black, who said the wrong word, and his channel was demonetized, and locked down
No.
for a few months. We can also speak about several people on Facebook, not necessarily right wingers or crazy left wingers, whose pages were brought down. Because, in as much as we have this bottom up from each of us being able to have a platform on social media, on the cell phones, etc., that the masters, the powers that be, have the power to shut us down. Have you ever thought about how do we make sure that these platforms, which are in fact independent, private, maintain our democracy?
It's a challenge because I consider op-ed news to be a curated content site. It's not a site for everybody. If I
Right.
get a submission from somebody saying Second Amendment is wonderful, everybody should have the right to own any kind of gun, including AR-15s and automatic weapons, I'm going to turn them down.
Right.
And if somebody, and so I curate, and we have a team of about 40 volunteer editors. I'm really excited. We just have a new one from Malaysia who just came on board. And that's a policy. We don't accept everything. I don't see YouTube the same way. YouTube is, I interview in my book Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter and Square, and what he told me that was really enlightening was that he considered Twitter to be a utility.
Exactly. That's the difference between Twitter and op-ed news. You are a website dedicated to the progressive movement. So, and that is stated. Twitter is a place for everybody now. It's either, when they start to limit on particular issues, you have to, where's the line? I don't know. Because,
Well,
yes, I don't want right-wing propaganda that will cause others harm. But at the same time, I don't want them taking off, infringing on anybody's free speech.
exactly. I think Alex Jones should have a right to have a voice
I do too.
in specific ways. I'm not going to publish him,
Right.
but he should have a right. He should have a right to speak. And when it comes to utility, you think, where does that go? Do you cut off electricity to somebody whose voice you don't like? Of course, they
Good
just
point.
did that to the Venezuelan embassy, I think.
I was in touch with Madier I guess a few days ago, and things were so hectic. We were in a conversation, and then it just stopped. So I think they were having some issues out there. I think they're in D.C. in the embassy in D.C.
Medea Benjamin.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I got a WhatsApp this morning from a young man here in Houston who's actually a friend of Guaido. He's very upset with Madier and Code Pink for what they're doing. And he sent me a long text this morning saying, well, we finally got your girl out of out of the embassy. Now, that is a sad state. This is kind of off subject, but what are your thoughts on Venezuela?
Well, I think that the U.S. has a long history of taking down regimes that are not convenient for big corporations and oil, and I think that this is happening there, and they're trying to do that, and it's so transparent because, let's face it, Trump's team are a team of idiots and fools. So they don't have any finesse in how to do it. I mean, it's been done so many times before, but these guys are such clumsy boobs the way they do things. And I think it's tragic. I mean, and you look at the New York Times, and they are feeding this narrative so much, it's unbelievable.
Fear has done a great, I don't know if you read fear.org, but they, FAIR.org, they have done a great job in pointing out how badly our news coverage is, not only of Venezuela, but also of Iran. And I tell you, Rob, I'm from Central America. I'm from Panama originally.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was over here when he did it, but when Bush invaded Panama and claimed, 1,000 Panamanians died, and the UN said 4,000 Panamanians died. And we know in Chorrillo, where this occurred, 10,000 Panamanians are unaccounted for. Nobody knows who were, I mean, we know that. And that was to get one person who didn't want to help him invade either Venezuela, either Nicaragua or Salvador. I don't remember which one. That was the real reason for the he didn't want to do what the United States wanted done for him.
Oh, by the way, in my book, The Bottom Up Revolution,
Yes.
I have a section from Medea Benjamin. After she interrupted Obama, I interviewed her on how do you interrupt the president. And the book goes through detailed step by step how you plan it, what you do, what to do when they grab you. So this is the kind of stuff that's in the book. I mean, the book, it has a lot of stuff on. I mean, what I tried to do in the book was think about bottom up from as many different perspectives as possible. It's never been done before. I tried to, the natives of Nunavut in far northern Canada, they have to have 50 different words for snow because they have to live with snow, and they need that kind of vocabulary in order to be most successful in negotiating living in a world of snow. And what I tried to do something like that with Bottom Up. I tried to expand the vocabulary massively because it is such an important part of who we are. And the more we understand it, the more effective we can use it to deal with other people and to make our own goals become a reality.
Well, I think that's an important book, especially in these times. Tell us exactly how we can get the book.
Probably the easiest way is if you go to robkall.com, ROBKALL.com. And then I've got a list of about 8 or 10 different sources for buying the book. You can go to Evil Amazon, or you can go to Pals, or you can buy it from independent booksellers or Target or Barnes & Noble. I've got links for all of those, so you have your choice on how to do it.
Well, I've just included, if you take a look at the lead there, included the robkall.com. I wish I had known that. I'd have put it up in the beginning, but I'll put that in the lead when I write the blog on this particular show and when the show goes live at 3 p.m. today. Okay, so folks, don't forget the name of the book by Rob Kall is Bottom Up Revolution. Every single activist should have that book it comes out in 2 days?
2 days, yes.
It comes out in 2 days. Have it in 2 days. Okay, before I let you go, Rob, I want to talk a little bit about Op-Ed News now. Tell us a little bit about your blog site. Well, it's not a blog site now. It's a full-fledged news site with authors from all over, including one of my favorite, the guy that was, can't believe it, I don't remember his name now, Chris Hedges, who is on there frequently as well. So tell us a little bit about what's your intent for the site, especially going into these difficult times in 2020?
Well, we've published over 100,000 articles, and we publish about 500 articles a week.
Wow.
Coming in from all over the world. We've got a team of volunteer editors to evaluate the ones that come in through the queue. We have about 150 or more top writers who have given us permission to reprint their content. So we do. And I consider us left of liberal, left of Bernie Sanders, but we also try to keep an open mind about content. Now we're not going to take extreme right-wing stuff, but we will take some libertarian content because I agree with some of that material and some of those ideas. A surprising amount of the time, actually. We've lost just about all of the Hillary supporters in 2016 because Hillary is a neoliberal, and we really take a stand against neoliberals as well as neocons, and we've done an awful lot of writing looking at how the Democratic Party has to be taken over and changed or replaced, and the way our political system works now, it's really hard to add a third party. So we're really excited and happy about the new crew of members of the House who came in, OAC and Omar and Tlaib, who that group, they're fabulous, and I can't wait till 2024 when OAC runs for president.
Rob, it's important that somebody like you come out here and say what you just said, because I've been having some important issues with people wanting us to simply establish a new party. And what I told them is that we could, yes, we could do that and we could spin our wheels, or we can do exactly what you said right there, and that is we work within the system to take it over and make it the way it should be. And your book falls right into what needs to be done to effect that bottom up. In other words, you bottom up with the precinct chairs in the party. You bottom up with the leadership on the bottom end, and you grow it all the way up. That is how it's done. So I hope you have a chapter on that in your book as well.
There's a chapter. The chapter is called "Bottom Up Revolution," and it talks about bottom up power. There are two kinds of power. There's hard power, which is top down. That's weapons and money, and it's based on force and coercion. And then there's soft power, which is based on attraction. That's culture and building bridges and schools. And we spend about 50 or more times more on hard power than we do on soft power. And Trump is trying to cut back even further. I mean, it's really diplomacy is where a lot of that happens. And I did an interview I really felt great about with Anne-Marie Slaughter, who was the policy director for the State Department under Hillary. And she talks a great talk about how bottom up diplomacy is not the future, but it's what's happening now. It's the way things are, and we just need to do so much more of that. If we could spend $500 billion or more a year on soft power, then we would be in such a better place, and the world would be in such a better place. Then I that part of the book has a great interview with Marina Citrin, who wrote about horizontalism and about revolutions and change, there's just so much more in there in that chapter. It was a really fun chapter to put together. But then so was the one on bottom up economics. Bottom up economics is something that can change everything. Public banking is one approach to it, and
cooperatives
and co-ops, as Wolf talks about in the book. There are so many ways that we can take very specific bottom up approaches to make this world change and make a bottom up world happen. And that's why I have over 50 endorsement blurbs from a lot of people that your listeners will recognize that say it's a hopeful book, because there is so much hope. It's not like we're in a bad place. We are, but there's a lot of hope, and there are a lot of ways that things can change. And that stuff is already in the beginning of happening. I love one of my interviews described bamboo. You water it for 3 years and nothing happens. Then all of a sudden, in 3 months, it grows 20 feet.
I know that we grow a lot of bamboo where I'm from, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
And that's what activism is about. Sometimes you got to do it, and you don't see a result. There's a wonderful story from that Daniel Ellsberg told me that's in the book about how he was inspired to become the activist that he is by an unknown guy who was going to go to jail because he had engaged in some protest in civil disobedience. I never can remember the guy's name, but that guy inspired Daniel Ellsberg to do something that changed the world. And you can do that. I'm talking about whoever is listening to this show. You don't have to be a famous person. You don't have to do something huge. You just have to be in the right place at the right time. And you, as one leaf of grass in a grassroots movement, can change the world. And you never know if you're going to be the one who does it unless you don't show up.
With that, we are speaking to Rob Kall, publisher of Op-Ed News at opednews.com, and of course the author of the book that will be out in 2 days, Bottom Up Revolution. The Bottom Up Revolution. Go to robkall.com. Rob, it was my pleasure to have you on, and we must do this again. Thank you very much for what you are doing, what you have been doing for the movement by keeping people informed with your wonderful site. Let's do this again.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for all you do.
You have a wonderful day, buddy.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.